All right, honey, got the camera set up, got the mic set up, ready to get back onto the channel, walk with God in marriage and all that.
I'm tired, so I really don't want to film right now. I'm tired. I don't want to film.
Oh no, are you crying with your emotions? Husbands, wives, have you seen manipulation through emotions in your marriage?
Listen in because we're going to give you 3 tips on how to spot it and root it out of your marriage.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Biblical Couple, where we help you walk with God in your marriage. So, manipulation through emotions. First of all, we just want to set the foundation that emotions themselves are good. They are God-given, God-glorifying, and should absolutely be used and expressed in a healthy marriage, but never used for manipulation.
So for manipulation, we're not talking about some crazy affair or divorce, but we're just talking about whenever you use your emotions for selfish gain.
Yeah, and that's the definition of being spoiled. When you use your emotions for selfish gain. And that leads us to our first tip, which is going to help you identify this. Tip number 1 is...
understand where you're spoiled.
Understand where you're spoiled. If we're honest with ourselves, all of us are pretty spoiled in lots and lots of areas. Let me just give you a simple illustration, right? I mean, how many of us, when we were kids, would throw temper tantrums when we didn't get what we wanted? I mean, all it takes is for you to go to a nursery or just go see your own kids when they're not getting the toys that they want, or when they're not getting the fruit that they want, or the ice cream or desserts or whatever, and then what happens, right? Exactly, right? Just using your emotions to punish the people around you, namely your parents, to show, oh, I'm displeased and I really want that thing.
So when you realize you're being led by your emotions instead of being led by the truth, maybe you are sinfully angry or sad, or you're sulking, or you feel depressed. Ask yourself, what am I wanting so badly right now that I'm willing to sin to get this one thing? And if you don't know what that one thing is in your heart, you can ask God. Psalm 139 verses 23 to 24 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts, and see if there be any hurtful way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." In the everlasting way. So if you don't know what you're trying to seek after, then simple, just ask God and He will for sure show you.
To give you guys some examples, let's say you are starting to feel angry and frustrated with your husband when you notice that he's not helping you with the dishes or changing the diapers, whatever it may be, and you start complaining about your work and complaining about him and complaining to him. There's nothing wrong with wanting him to help, and nothing wrong at all with wanting to communicate that, but you know that you are manipulating emotionally because you're ready to have sinful anger and to have sinful complaints against God because of what you're trying to get.
Another example of this is maybe your husband is really busy at work. It's a busy season of life for him, or maybe he can't text back to you right away, and you just begin sulking because you really want him to text you back. And then maybe he comes home from work and you give him the cold shoulder, you're not talking to him as much, and you're just kind of silently protesting that you don't like the situation. That is emotionally manipulating.
Another practical example is if maybe a husband is trying to challenge lovingly and gently his wife. Maybe it's a sin issue, or maybe it's just like a bad habit that he wanted to kind of bring up, or maybe it's just an opportunity that she has to grow in a certain area and he wants to talk to her about that. But then all of a sudden she's like, she senses the tension and she doesn't like that. Whoa. Starts to give the cold shoulder, starts to clam up a little bit, doesn't want to engage in the conversation, and starts to kind of distance herself and try to change the subject. That is another example of emotional manipulation, because you as a wife would be using your emotions to try to control the situation and avoid that uncomfortability, even though it would be healthy.
Now that we understand where we're spoiled, tip number 2 is also very important to understand, and that is Understand the power of your emotions.
A really good biblical example of this, or should I say a bad example of this, would be Delilah with Samson. So Samson was a judge of Israel, a man that God raised up to be a leader for his people. And you can read about his story in Judges 13 through 16. The thing that was distinct about Samson was that he had super strength. In Judges 14:6, it actually says that he tears a young lion apart with his bare hands.
Pretty crazy.
The thing, or the person that was more powerful than him though, was Delilah, because she used the power of her emotional manipulation. Samson was dedicated to God by his parents from a young age, and part of that dedication was this vow to never bring a razor to his head. And so that was the secret to his super strength. And Delilah was commissioned by Samson's enemies to go in there and manipulate emotionally and try to figure out what was the secret to his strength. And you can read what Delilah says in Judges 16:15-16.
Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have deceived me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength is." It came about when she pressed him daily with her words and urged him that his soul was annoyed to death. I love that.
Oh man, that is such a good description.
sad.
Annoyed to death. Wow. Stop bothering me. Stop bothering me. Oh, I'm being so pressed by your emotions. And then he just spills the beans and says, okay, forget it. If it could just give me a few minutes of respite, I will let you know the secret to my super strength. And she goes and finds out. Cut the hair. Strength goes. Bye-bye.
And then his eye goes bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, because his enemies go in, snip his hair, and then gouge his eyes out and enslave him. Thankfully, there is a good ending to the story where God gives Samson one final victory, and God shows himself faithful still, as always. But the point of all of this is to show, wow, the power of a woman's emotions, that this woman, Delilah, could take down this giant of a man, Samson, through that daily pressing of words. And so, wives, just want to encourage you, now that you understand the power of your emotions along with those root issues, now you have that hope to bring those root issues before the Lord so that you can use your emotions to strengthen and benefit your husband instead of weakening him and detrimenting him. I hope you are pumped up for the third and final tip, because this is going to give you a lot of hope. The third tip is:
submit your will to God's will and your emotions will follow.
This is the hope of the gospel, that God's Spirit lives in us, where we are now able to live according to His power, according to God's word, and submitting our wills underneath God's will, so that we may have the right emotions that follow. Of course, if you are not a Christian, our hope and encouragement to you would be to watch this video right here, which explains the gospel message, which has saved our lives, and we hope will save your life too. But for today's video, let's finish up with a practical example about what it looks like to submit your will to God's will and having the emotions follow.
So let's go back to that first example of washing the dishes. So you are at the sink and you are really frustrated with your husband because he's not doing what you had communicated with him earlier, and you're complaining to God about how he's not measuring up to what you had asked him to do.
And again, there's nothing wrong with communicating and talking with your husband with that cool head and that gentle heart about the dishes and needing some help or whatever it might be. But the critical thing right now is submitting that heart before the Lord so you don't sin in your emotions.
So some passages that you can reflect on during those times is Philippians 2:3-4, which says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves." Verse 4, "Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others." And another passage is Mark 10:45, which says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many."
Yeah, when you reflect on memory verses like that, and it is super crucial that you were intaking the word and memorizing it so we can use it in those times, we are then able to have that right emotion, which stems from knowing that we are able to be like Christ in serving our family. And the wife just realizing, if I can just have that servant's heart ready to take on the task, whatever it may be. And maybe, you know, right now I can just knock out the dishes, it's no problem. Let's not make a big deal out of it. And I know that by submitting my heart before the Lord, not being willing to sin against Him, by having that anger and being content and thankful for these dishes that we have to even be able to wash and to be able to serve the family in that way, all of that is pleasing to the Lord. That's a godly attitude, and knowing that that is honoring to God gives that motivation to then have the emotions of joy and thankfulness and contentment, to then be able to glorify God in the actions and the emotion, and you eliminate all of the potential manipulation. So we hope this video was super encouraging to you guys and really, really helpful. If anything really stuck out to you in this video, or if you have any questions, feel free to drop those comments or questions below in the discussion board, and we would be more than happy to interact with you guys. It's been a really, really big pleasure to talk with you guys on these videos and to watch what the Lord's doing in this channel. Hope to see you guys in the next one.
Bye guys.